All right, folks, welcome to Naming, Putting It All Together. This is the last podcast of this unit. Congratulations. I know this was a tough unit to do, and I know you guys have had a lot of worksheets to do, but you got to do this to really master it, to make sure you know these names. You need to know the names cold. All right? So when I say calcium chloride, you should immediately say CaCl2. Not even thinking, it should just come right out. Okay? All right. There are four types of compounds that we've talked about: ionic, covalent, acids, and hydrates. Right? Covalent were the last ones we just did. Now, how can you tell the difference given the names? What I'd like you to do is pause the video right now, look at those four things up there, and see, based on just names, how you can tell the difference between the four. Okay. Well, if you thought about it for a minute, it's pretty easy to do. All right. So, how can you tell the difference from just the name? Well, if it's an acid, it tells you. It's going to be something like hydrochloric acid, so it tells you. If you have hydrates, how can you tell? It tells you, because you've got the word hydrate in it. How can you tell up here? Well, if it's covalent, it has a prefix before the second word. Always. It always has a prefix. And if there's no prefix, it's got to be ionic, because that's what's left over. All right, now with these two, you can also tell, because for an ionic one, the first one's a metal, or it's ammonia. Okay. So, look at these names. Tell the difference. All right. Clearly, acetic acid is an acid. Hydrochloric acid is an acid. Trihydrate is a hydrate. Decahydrate is a hydrate. Right? So now I look at what's left. Notice the dioxide. It's covalent. The trichloride. It's covalent. It's also between two nonmetals, nitrogen and chlorine. This one is between carbon and oxygen. Right? This one's ionic. It's between a metal and a nonmetal. Aluminum sulfate. Metal, nonmetal. Okay? So, if it's an acid, it tells you. If it's a hydrate, it tells you. If it's covalent, it has a prefix before the second word. Always, always, always. Which leaves ionic ones. Ionic also has the first word as a metal unless it's ammonium. But that's it. Those are your rules. How about if I just give you the substances? What can you do with the substances? How can you tell those? Well, that should be pretty easy as well. Look at these. How do you know if something's an acid? It starts with H, so it's an acid. It starts with H, so it's an acid. How do you tell if something's a hydrate? It's got this big thing out at the end of how many waters it's got. Those are the hydrates. So your acids and your hydrates are really, really easy to pick out without even thinking much. Right? So if you look at your covalent ones have to be between nonmetals. So phosphorus and oxygen are nonmetals. Carbon and chlorine are nonmetals. So let's look at what's left. Well, that's a metal and a nonmetal. So that's ionic. That's a metal and a nonmetal. So that's ionic. Right? So you should be able to tell that way. So if it's an acid, it starts with H. If it's a hydrate, it ends in .H2O. If it's ionic, it starts with a metal or potentially ammonium, which is NH4, which leaves you covalent, which always starts with a nonmetal because it's a nonmetal to nonmetal. Those are the rules. So, clearly there are two things you need to do when you're naming any compound. The first is you need to figure out what kind of compound you're dealing with. And the second is you need to apply the proper rules to name it, or create the formula for it if you're going that way. Right? But the first thing you need to do is figure out what type it is. And the second thing you need to do is apply the proper rules. Right? So, that's putting it all together. And that's all there is to it. So you need to go practice. You've got another worksheet that specifically focuses on going through and determining what the thing is. And then once you know what it is, then you can go out and name it properly. All right? That's it for this unit. If you did it all, I'll tell you, you'll do great for the rest of the year. All right, because you should be able to build on this for the rest of the year. All right, if you have questions, ask me in class. Otherwise, I'll see you then. Have a great day. Bye-bye.